So, as you alluded to in your speech, Paul Penna, the presence of Paul woven into the fabric of Agnico Eagle. After Paul passed on, you've been now the CEO for 20 years. That's incredible stability at the top of a company that at the same time has gone through incredible growth. Can you talk a little bit, first off, on the culture that you've created and how that's fed into the success that you've been able to have?
The culture, we look at that as a tremendous competitive advantage, because I think how it manifests itself is what I was just saying in the introduction, is that what that results in is people coming to work every day looking to make a contribution. And I think there's an important tie-in to innovation. If you want innovation to work, it's only going to work, or it's going to work best, at companies that actually have a sound, solid business, and they have a workforce that's coming to work every day making that contribution. So I think with Agnico, we don't sort of spend time thinking every day, boy, you know, we need to do this for the culture, we need to do that for the culture. It's just ingrained, and it was ingrained, I think, in all of us as we looked at the example that you referred to with Paul Penna. I remember the first time I met him, and the table that I was sitting at as a young auditor is in my office right now. And Paul walked in, didn't look like the CEO, could have been the janitor, just the way he would carry himself. He had a briefcase. It was a brown briefcase. And I said, geez, that's a nice briefcase. And he goes, here, have it. Oh, no, I can't take it. I'm the auditor. He started to empty out the papers and said, yeah, I got it last week. Here, take it. I made the mistake once of saying I liked lemon meringue pie. The next day he was in with 10 pies. So I sort of learned quickly, you know, don't say you like something, because he was one of these generous, charitable guys. So, you know, part of the things that have made us successful is, sure, we have to get results. We have to make money for our shareholders. We have to make this a long-term investment. We just found ourselves in a position where we felt that you just have to run a good business that happens to be a gold mining business. If you do that, and you look after your employees, and you look after those communities, as we mentioned, you'll be a huge success, and we've been fortunate to be able to do that.
I want to drill down on that a little bit more. Paul was this big personality for the younger generation here that maybe doesn't know the history. Strongly recommend to read up on Paul. Agnico celebrated its 60th anniversary last year, so there's some great literature there. But when you're coming in as a CEO, and you were an auditor, you weren't a mining person by training, and you're under, in some ways, there's this large shadow of Paul Penna. I'd just like to know more about Sean Boyd, the person. How was that for you? Was there any, thinking back 20 years ago, what were some of the challenges you faced in coming in as the leader of a company that was very defined by such a big personality in the industry?
Yeah, I never really thought of, you know, following in somebody's footsteps. I was honored to have the responsibility, but we quickly had to get back down to business, because the revenue was only 50 million. Our EBITDA was around 4 million. We were making no money. We actually had no money. We had to quickly go out and raise money, because we had a good deposit at LaRonde. We had exceptional skills. So the challenge there was to take the exceptional skills and the great people with a world-class deposit and build a business from there in a way that, as we said, made contributions in the communities with our employees and for the shareholders. So I think it was not sort of worried about, you know, what the legacy was or anything like that. It was just getting down to business and trying to just create a great, solid business.
And let's stay with that a bit. So LaRonde, fantastically rich, one of the great deposits in Canadian mining history, lets you build up a technical team. From 2010 to 2015, in that range, when I was still a reporter, you had one of the most ambitious growth profiles of any mining company. 5 mines you were constructing, relatively in a very tight time order. You need incredible technical skill to do that. Can you talk a little bit about how you're able to generate that internal intellectual capital and that expertise, and how that's played into your growth?
It's a key part of the strategy. As many of you know, we build our own mines. So our job is to allocate capital. And so we feel more comfortable allocating capital when our people who have a vested interest are essentially driving the bus, rather than turning it over to an engineering firm and say, hey, why don't you build that mine? Call us in 3 years. give us the keys and we hope everything works. So we take very much a hands-on approach, and you have to think long-term. And I think for us is that when we attract employees, they get that sense right away that we take our lead from the technical people. We allocate capital consistently over time. So we're not, there are many resource companies out there that will spend, based on the gold price in a pattern like that. Agnico invests steadily over time, and that's how you keep good people. And that's how you keep good people committed and energized and bringing good ideas forward and making a difference. So that's sort of ingrained in the way we think.
How does that factor in, do you think, in your estimation on the I mean, we're here speaking about innovation, having that kind of steady investment through the good times and the bad, having that technical team. How does that produce more of a fertile ground for innovation or not? Just how does innovation tie in with
Well,
that?
innovation's like exploration. If you don't drill, you're not going to find anything. So if you don't invest in technology and ideas and invest in your people who are bringing those ideas forward, then you're not going to improve your business. So I think that's ingrained in the way we think. There are many, many more good ideas than the capital that we're willing to allocate in the business at $1,200 gold. But the people know that if they come forward with a good idea, we'll find a way to fund it. And that's the way we've run the business for many, many years. And so when we get ideas at certain sites to dramatically change the cost structure or improve the efficiencies based on introducing a new technology, then we listen as much as we listen when we've got a good drill result at a deposit. Good example is the rail veyor at Goldex. Old technology applied in an innovative way, which lowers the cost as we go deeper. LaRonde, deep mine, you mentioned that. So LaRonde, a world-class deposit, but not an easy mine. Would we have thought 20 years ago that we'd be mining below 3 kilometers? No. Why are we able to do it? The people. Always thinking about ways to do things better, ways to do things cheaper in terms of less cost, ways to do things safer. And we're as productive now at 3 kilometers as we were in the upper parts of that mine. So we just generally take the lead from the technical side in terms of where we should put the emphasis and how we should allocate capital and follow up on good ideas.
And for some people that aren't aware, I mean, with Goldex, there was massive technical difficulties, and you guys, a lot of companies would have just thrown up their hands. Instead, you guys pivoted. George Hemingway spoke earlier about pivoting, and if my memory serves correct, it was then you went to a satellite deposit on the property, and were able to keep the operations going. And can you talk a little bit about that?
Well, Goldex, there's many good examples of how we think at Goldex. And Goldex was an asset that we first got involved with in 1971. And it took us 37 years to figure it out, to get it into production. And one of our consultants for many, many years, Mr. Wenzel Hubachek, who's 95 and still around, he told me when I became CEO, he said, whatever you do not sell Goldex. And his experience was being mine managers along Highway 117 in the Abitibi in the 50s. So he said, look, you're going to get underground, there's going to be lots of gold there. So we finally got a mine built and established and essentially making money mining 1.6 grams per ton underground. We had an issue with rock stability. We had consultants suggest that there was an issue. Within days, we had that mine closed. So we reacted quickly. The board met at 2 o'clock on an afternoon within days of receiving a second opinion on the ground conditions. And in that board meeting at 2 o'clock, within a half an hour, one of the directors said, what time's the night shift? And Ebe Shirkus at the time, the COO, said it's 4 o'clock. Call the mine, there's no night shift tonight. And so we had a management team on site that then had to respond and react very quickly with employees, with the community, with the regulators, us with the market. But this is the people part of Agnico's equation. Within half an hour, the decision was made, what are we going to tell the employees? You're going to tell the employees not to worry. You're going to go home. We're not sure how long. Don't worry for 3 months. You're all going to get full pay. And so it's no surprise that the workforce kept thinking about ways to resurface value. And that mine is up and running now. That mine's making extremely good money. mining 1.6 grams underground. We're employing technology like railveyor systems in, and the deposit continues to go and continues to get deeper. And so that's the way we think. Long-term, invest with your people. But again, it wasn't a reckless decision to go back. Our team decided we should hire the 3 foremost experts on rock mechanics, hydrogeology in Canada. And that was a panel that worked with our team, oversaw what that team was doing, vetted the plans, and then we hired an engineering firm on top of them to do a further risk assessment before we put $90 million back at Goldex to get a base case working of 3.5 years mine life. Well, it's been running for restarted for more than 3.5 years. There's probably another 10 years, and if you drive by, look in the neighborhood, there's a few drills hanging around there because that deposit's likely going to grow.
Goldex in Quebec, La Ronde in Quebec. Sometimes when you've spoken publicly, you talk about the business in terms of platforms. You have the Quebec platform, Nunavut platform with Meadowbank operating and Meliadine coming online, the Mexico platform, and the Finland platform. Also, you've pointed to one of the secrets of the Agnico success is creating a manageable business. So 4 platforms, you're now a global producing miner. How do you mitigate against the risk in your next phase of growth? If it is about adding another platform, how do you maintain a manageable business?
The beauty about this current growth phase, as we bring on Meliadine and Nunavut, and we bring on the Amaruq satellite deposit both next year, we will see our production go to over 2 million ounces a year. Based on our pipeline, we can get to 2.2, maybe a little bit higher than that. We're still working on some of the opportunities like Kirkland Lake and that camp there. So even with significantly more production than what we're producing today, which is about 1.6 million ounces, we're still the same 4 regions with the same number of mines. So that's an extremely manageable business. But with the capacity that there could be a 5th region if it fit. Do we need a 5th region to create value going forward? We don't. Do we need to do big M&A and buy production to create value? We do not. Are we always focused on the pipeline? Yes, because we're thinking long term. But for us, it's a matter of understanding and managing risk. And as we look at risk, not allowing that to get in the way of opportunity. And we've built this business on taking geological risk by keeping political risk low, by keeping financial risk low, by keeping execution risk low, by keeping technical risk low, by not introducing excessive risk when we do M&A, so that we can follow our geologist. I'll do a commercial for Elaine Blackburn. He would never say this, very quiet guy, has been with us for almost 30 years running exploration. We were up at Meliadine, and he was talking about how many ounces he's discovered in his career. And he estimates roughly 45 million ounces. So that's a key part of our strength, is making sure that we put ourselves in a position to be successful, invest consistently in exploration over time, and always keep an eye on the long term and keep an eye on the pipeline and support good ideas.
Fantastic. And I think a lot of that comes out of your strong relationships with junior miners and taking minority interest in staying on. I mean, Agnico's been a pioneer, and a lot of companies, larger companies, are now following in suit. I'd like to ask you a question. There was one question that came up during the first panel. We're taking live questions from the audience, and we didn't get a chance to do it. And as you're speaking, it comes back to me. And the idea was that with collaboration in the industry, whether that be through M&A or other collaborative exercises, does that factor into ushering in a new wave of innovation? And I'm thinking specifically with your large transaction with Yamana for Canadian Malartic, with the acquisition of Osisko. Is there anything to that? Does that collaboration now working with Yamana on an important mine foster more innovation?
I think one of the hallmarks of the mining industry, which sort of surprised me when I first got involved with it, was how cooperative companies were with reciprocal site visits. It was almost something that was just second nature and ongoing. And companies weren't sort of overly protective of things that they had come to know or come to learn or implement. And that's still the case today. So I think you're going to continue. The industry has to do that. This is not getting any easier. It gets tougher all the time and continues to be challenging. So whether it's companies coming together to create a stronger base and foundation, that's a good thing. The quick cost savings have happened as companies over the last few years deconstructed and took out overhead and took out fat and tried to take out complexity. The last costs that I think are in there are probably overhead costs. So if we can get some smart mergers that actually eliminate overhead, I think that would be good. But it's really about risk and how much risk you're willing to take on. In terms of the Osisko deal of Canadian Malartic, Goldcorp announced their bid, their hostile bid, on a Monday. We were actually on our way to Kittila in Finland. Our plane landed to refuel, and I had saw the press release, called someone who I thought would be an advisor to Osisko, turned out to be an advisor. I got back Wednesday night. They were in my office Thursday morning. We were meeting with Osisko on Saturday. So Agnico Eagle was the first guys in the data room, the first guys to complete their work, the first guys to express a view on value. Then we sat for 3 months. Why? Because we weren't going to do a deal, or we weren't going to bite on a structure that we weren't comfortable with. If it wasn't going to happen the way we wanted it to happen, we weren't going to do it, even though it was in our backyard, even though our employees would drive by it every day hundreds of times. We just waited for an opening, and it didn't take long once we were invited to actually put something more formal on paper. That deal was wrapped up in 3 days. And the structure that I talked about in that first meeting, 4 days after the hostile bid, was essentially the structure that was used to create the transaction. And we're happy we own it. It was a well-built mine, a lot of great employees. You can see the productivity improvement since 2014. One of the reasons we wanted to get involved is we thought there was tremendous exploration potential outside of the pits. And we continue to drill, and we have Odyssey, we have East Malartic, there's other areas in that property. It will likely get bigger, so we're happy to own it.
And it's now part of mining lore that yourself, Peter Maroney, and Sean Rusin got together on a weekend and hammered out the deal. Is that accurate?
They got together, sat around that same table where Paul Penna was trying to force that briefcase on me. That same small table. So there's a lot of history at that table.
Full circle. Fantastic. So we've talked about stability at the top. How does that factor into succession planning? I mean, you've had this incredible run under Paul's leadership, now under your leadership. How does Agnico approach, in the context of that kind of stability, how do you approach succession planning?
Well, it's a discussion that is a constant with the board. If you look at the board's job, it's to get the strategy right and make sure the right leadership is being developed. So it's a constant topic. It's not one of these things where we wait for an event to happen and then we try to work on it quickly. So we see it as a broad-based approach to identify, particularly on the technical side, those technical people that can actually connect all the dots and understand what it takes to create value. And it's not easy to do. And what we do to help foster that development is we give them new roles, different roles. We get them exposed to our investor base. So we were at the Denver Gold Forum a couple of weeks ago, and Agnico Eagle takes 13 people to the Denver Gold Forum. Why? Because we have technical people there that we want sitting in a room having a dialogue with our owners and our shareholders. So they can say, hey, that kind of makes sense. When we started that plan a few years back, I had a mine manager after about 3 meetings say, what's EBITDA? What's net debt to EBITDA? And I'd explain it. Now I understand what you guys are asking for when you come up to the mine and want to do this or want to do that. So that's important, that the technical side is comfortable with finance, comfortable with investor relations, comfortable with the market, because one of the challenges in this industry is getting capital. And for a huge pool of capital, they just look at this industry as uninvestable. And so companies have to, basically, when we go into meetings, knowing that someone sitting on the other end of this table, or the other side of the table, doesn't have to buy a gold stock. You basically have to make the case that this is a great business that happens to be a gold mine. And so for us, in terms of developing those leaders, we want to make sure that they make that connection, and so that makes them better engineers and better technical people. So the other thing that we've done is we created back in 2012, on the back of some challenges at Meadowbank, on the back of some challenges at GoldX, coming off of building the 5 mines, we created a business strategy group just to pay people to think about our business. So it's important where we look at the high potential leaders that they get exposure in the business strategy group. They get exposure in corporate development. They get exposure in investor relations. And we throw them into responsibilities outside their comfort zone. For example, the gentleman that runs Nunavut, Dominic Girard, VP Nunavut, summer student, started at LaRonde, a metallurgist. Everybody knows that when Kittila started with an autoclave, autoclaves can be temperamental. We had some challenges. Recovery was expected to be mid 80%. It started off at 30 and 35 and 40, so it wasn't good. We sent him over. He was part of the team that fixed it. He did such a great job. We said, our next biggest challenge is Meadowbank. Would you like to go to Meadowbank? That's your reward. You're going to go to Meadowbank. So here's a metallurgist, never really run a big team. We put him in charge of our biggest mine that had some challenges and issues, but we set him up with a veteran industry person to sort of guide him, turn that place around. We brought him to Toronto. Technical services, mine planning, budgeting. And then when we looked at Meliadine and we looked at Amaruq and we said, boy, that's going to be a huge platform for us. You need people that can carry these things because you're dealing with nature. Stuff happens. And so you need a leader. And so we asked him, said, look, we're moving into this next phase. It's going to be a huge part of our business. We'd like you to take on that challenge. He said, well, I have to speak to my family and everything. And most people will take a week or 2 weeks. Next morning he comes in, says, thanks for the confidence. He says, I'm happy to do this. And he says, by the way, your Nunavut platform will be producing 1 million ounces a year one day. Boy, that's what you want. So when we look at our corporate chart, and I talk to the board about this every quarter as we watch it, and we look at the different roles in the boxes, there's no empty spaces. If you're a headhunter or placement, anybody out here, don't call us. We don't need you. We've got a lineup of people coming into each box, and that's been a strength. We want to hire internal as much as we can. Not that we haven't hired external, but people get the culture. They work together. Why have we been successful? Not because our people are technically good, but the leadership has worked with each other for so long. When we sit around that little table again, coming back to the table, and we're shooting an idea around, I don't have to sit there as CEO and say, oh, that guy's telling me that because he's trying to outdo that person over there. These guys work together, they hang out together, their wives are friends. There's a trust factor that exists, so when we're making big capital decisions like Meliadine, $900 million US, when we're ready to go, we're ready to go. Because not only have we vetted it, but we're turning it over to people that we trust with the experience and the track record to make sure it happens.
There's that word trust. It's so integral to getting good business done. When it's there, you can move forward. I did want to, we need to wrap up very quickly, but I did want to highlight something that I find very interesting, and that is the $5 million that Agnico has given to start up a university in Nunavut. Can you speak to why that's a significant commitment of capital? Why did you choose to allocate it there?
That's easy. That was an easy one. We just find Nunavut is one of these rare places in the world today from a mining perspective. It's one of those rare places that has tremendous mineral potential, but you could actually get things done. The Inuit are not anti-mining. The Inuit, Nunavut was set up, the residents of Nunavut, the 40,000 or so residents of Nunavut. When it was set up, Nunavut in 1999, they took a cash payment from the federal government. They also took 18% direct ownership in the landmass. They selected the 18% beside geological consultants that said, look, here's the 18% with the best potential. They're in the mining business. They're in the resource development business. And so they're looking for partners like Agnico Eagle with the experience of being up there for 10 years to get that done. But they have a lot of needs. It's it's infrastructure challenged, not just roads, but energy capacity. That's a great way that innovation can help with storage, battery storage, et cetera, as we look to alternatives to diesel. But it's all this potential that needs infrastructure, and part of that infrastructure is education. And the Inuit are very tight-knit families. You can have 3 or 4 generations living in the same house. And so for a graduate of high school to think beyond high school to university, it's a challenge because they got to leave home. And some find it tough. Some don't last a semester. You know, they get homesick. They need to come home. So our chairman, Jim Nasso, picked up on a comment that the former Governor General Michel Jean made several years ago, and saying Canada's the only circumpolar nation without a university. So Agnico stepped up several years ago and said, look, we're willing to help get that started. For bricks and mortar, you know, we want to make sure that things are done properly. It's been a struggle. Not that people aren't appreciative, but it's how to get things done. And so basically, you've got to, we find as a company doing business there that is the single biggest part of the GDP from a business perspective, is that you've got to sort of push those initiatives. And we're doing that. We're doing some things in the community around sports. We just feel that we'll be in Nunavut for many, many decades. And as Canadians, we should be championing places like Nunavut, because it's going to be a huge value generator for this country over time as we develop the resources in Canada's far north.
Fantastic. Sean, it's been a true pleasure having you here. You're an extremely deserving recipient of the 2017 Mining Person of the Year Award. So thank you very much.
Thank you. Thank you, everybody.